Welcome to Dollars and Cents, Creating Your Fulfilled Life with Nicole Romito from Private Vista. In this podcast, we draw from years of experience as well as guest specialists to help you create the life you imagine. Join us in this journey as we enlighten and empower you to align your lifestyle to help you achieve your goals with a clear picture of your future. Now, let's get to the show.
And welcome to Dollars and Cents with your host, Nicole Romito. Nicole, I'm excited about today's podcast because this is really a part 2. And I really enjoyed listening to part 1. So without further ado, I kind of want to get this underway.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's going to be lots to talk about. And yes, this is our part 2 of a 2-part episode. So I'd like to welcome back Dr. Lydia Richardson. Hi, Lydia. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you. Hi. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time to do a 2-part series for us. For our listeners, just so they know, we are going to be talking about the emotional aspects of divorce. During part 1, if you haven't had a chance to listen to that episode, Lydia and I focused on how to take care of yourself during the divorce process. And what we are going to focus on today is how do you take care of your children during the divorce process? Because you're still going to have your emotions and clearly the kids are going to have theirs as well. Before we get into that exciting topic, one which I know we have a lot to cover, in case you did not listen to part 1, I want to give a brief bio. As I mentioned, Dr. Lydia Richardson is in studio with me today. She's a licensed clinical psychologist, divorce mediator, collaborative coach, child and family specialist. She has provided services to adults, couples, and families in a variety of settings for over 20 years. She's very passionate about alternative dispute resolution, and she does everything she can to help couples divorce with less conflict as to promote happier families and more productive co-parenting. She believes that families can transcend the difficulty of divorce and evolve into happy and productive individuals, both within their relationship with the other parent and certainly as co-parents to their kids. So with that, Lydia, before we kind of start our conversation, I know our listeners always enjoy knowing a little bit about you, our guests personally. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about you, and then we'll get started.
Oh, gosh. Sure. I am a native New Yorker, grew up there, but have been in Chicago over 25 years now. I have 3 children who are all in grad school back east, a 2-year-old grandson. And I now have a new role as of the last few years, which is stepmom to a 4th bonus son.
Oh, yes. No, that is great. And I think both, I'll share this. I know you shared it in the prior episode, both of us are divorced. So I don't have children, but you have your own children. So you can certainly share both what you've learned personally and then certainly professionally helping other parents go through the process.
Definitely.
I know when we see this, that the parents generally, they want the divorce to impact the kids as little as possible. We'll hear things like, I want to stay in the house. It's the one consistency we can keep for the kids. Or, no, we can't cut back on any of the activities that they're in. It's not the kids' fault we're getting a divorce. We've also then seen too, though, where the kids are used as pawns or they are put in the middle of the divorce. We've seen parents overshare with the kids about maybe things about the other parent or the process. So I just threw a lot of stuff against the wall. Since you are the resident emotional expert on this podcast, why don't I'm going to let you maybe decide how you want to unpack all that. That's my therapy term I'm using, listeners. See, I do learn from you. But what you'd like to unpack first so that it can maybe be a little more cohesive and our listeners can get some key takeaways of how to help their kids as they're going through the divorce process.
Sure. And you touched on several things I already, have in my mind to talk about. So
Perfect.
Just jump in.
All right. I love it.
Yeah, I guess the first thing I'll say, and not to be a Debbie Downer, but divorce does impact families. And it absolutely does impact children. It's on the list of, something that we clinicians know well, a list of things called the adverse childhood experiences, all of which can be predictors for future problems, mental health problems, substance abuse, things like that. That said, I will tell you that as more and more research was done on divorce, we find that there are plenty of ways that you parents can mitigate much of the damage that impacts kids. So that's what I want to talk about. You have a lot of control over what happens for your kids, okay? And it's going to be hard. You're going to have to put on your big girl panties because if you don't, and this is something that I tell clients all the time, you're going to negatively impact your kids. And it won't be because you got divorced. It'll be because of the things you did while getting divorced or after you got divorced. So that's a really important message out there. You have control. You can absolutely minimize the negative impact to your children. But by the same token, you can make it way worse if you don't get your behaviors in check.
Can you give some examples of behaviors that you, if you experience, you notice that you're doing these, what are some of these destructive behaviors and how can you kind of check yourself?
Sure. The biggest main behavior that, is supported by research is conflict or exposing your children to conflict. So as best you can, do not engage in conflict with your partner in front of your children. And I'm going to extend that to don't do it on the phone. Don't do it if the kids are anywhere in the vicinity. And don't talk to your kids about it. You may think that talking to your kids about it after the fact is not exposing them to conflict, but it is. It's doing it in an insidious way that puts them in the middle and puts them in a really difficult position. Yeah. So that's one thing. Don't engage in conflict. Don't talk negatively to your children about their other parent. That's another one that it can be really hard not to do, especially if you're in a very angry place with your spouse as you're going through this process. Right. The thing that I tell parents is you've got to remember that that other parent makes up 50% of your child's DNA. Right. And your child doesn't have to be that old to know that and understand that. And so that means that anytime you say something negative about your child's parent to them, and or say things that make it clear how angry you are with that parent and or that you've lost love for that parent, your child cannot help wondering when the other shoe's going to drop and you're going to stop loving them and or get angry at them because guess what? They're half of that other parent and they may share a lot of that parent's characteristics. I know that no good parent wants their child wondering if they're going to stop loving them or if they're going to hate them because they look like or somehow share characteristics with someone else. So that's a really big one. Be careful how much talking you do about the divorce or your other parent or any of the difficult emotions you're going through and to whom. Here again, you may decide or think that it's okay to confide in your best friend who happens to have kids who are friends with your kids. Or perhaps you confide in your sister, whose children happen to be your kids' cousins. I can't tell you how many adults I've worked with in my psychotherapy practice who can still remember either finding out about their parents' divorce from a third party or hearing negative things about their parents' divorce or negative things that one or the other parent had said about the other through third parties. And it's almost never with malicious intent. It's not that somebody decided, oh, I'm going to get in here and tell this kid something negative. Of course not. It's you thought the kid was napping or you thought the kid wasn't home. So I really urge parents, be really hypervigilant when having any discussions about the divorce or their other spouse, anywhere where their children might be in the vicinity.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice. And especially the fact of remember your children are, like you said, 50% of each of you. So that is a key fact.
Yeah.
What are there maybe, I know there are, and we probably don't have time to go into it, but obviously children's a very generic term and you could have children from a newborn baby up to maybe even like a 25 or 30-year-old. And they're still children of those parents. So I don't know if it's possible. I mean, clearly, if you're talking to a newborn baby, you're probably okay there. But
yeah.
But if you're, even if we look at, if they're toddlers, or if you want to say grade school, versus what is okay to talk about if they're in high school or college.
I'm so glad you bring that up because first off, there are so many more grade divorces happening nowadays. Grade divorce, we talk about, parents in their 50s and older, long-term marriages, which means oftentimes the kids are much older. Kids might be in their 20s or 30s or 40s. And many of us, professionals included, prior to more, looking at more research and getting more experience, assumed that at that age, the kids would be fine.
Exactly.
And in fact, what we're finding out is that it can be just as devastating for a 40-year-old when their parents get divorced as it can be for a 4-year-old. In fact, often more so.
More so, right? Yeah.
So everything that I said prior about not talking negatively about the other parent, be careful who you're talking to and when, and if your kids are in the vicinity, don't, put your kids in the middle. Don't confide in your kids is another one I'll add here. I'm going to actually say that applies no matter what age your kids are, especially as you go through the process and you're still going through the process. You cannot take words back. I say this to clients again and again, and I say it to myself to remind myself when I'm in my own difficult situation. Yes. You cannot put the toothpaste back in the tube. And so err on the side of saying less. You always will have the opportunity later if you want to. But your question is a really good one because, of course, what a 4-year-old needs in a divorce process is going to be very different from what a 14-year-old needs and or what a 24-year-old needs. And it's one of the reasons that in a collaborative divorce process, we'll often bring in a mental health professional to take the lead in forming the parenting plan. And so that's one of the roles that I might play in a collaborative process. And what that means is that I'm often the person meeting with the couple and putting together all of the agreements that have to be made to complete the co-parenting plan. And if we're in a collaborative process, it means that the attorneys really only come in at the end of that process to turn the document into what's necessary from a legal perspective to file with the court. So it does matter a lot. And you don't want a cookie cutter approach because how could you have the same need for a 4-year-old as a 14-year-old or a 24-year-old?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I want to circle back on is and ask you a question. What if your spouse is confiding in the kids or bad mouthing you, or, in today's world, a lot of stuff, we've seen a lot of crazy stuff through texts or email, and they're sharing those with the kids. I mean, how would you coach if your client is the parent who they're being bad mouth or their spouse is bad talking them to the kids?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it happens way more than I like.
Yes, I know.
I guess my very quick answer is I coach my parents to take the high road, knowing how difficult that is. Having been through a difficult divorce myself that had a flavor of some of that in it. Mm-hmm. Take the high road. You will never regret taking the high road. And I'll define that by saying, don't try to, don't enter that arena. They said something bad about you. Don't try to tell the kids, oh, that's not true, or he doesn't know what he's talking about, or she doesn't know what she's talking about. Your best bet and what best practices are for the well-being of your children are to support them. If they come and tell you about these things, and this is how you're finding out about it, absolutely validate their difficult feelings. Tell them that you're there to listen and to support them and help them. Mm-hmm. And also tell them that for their sake, you're not going to talk specifics with them about any of these things, that these are things to be dealt with between the adults, not the children.
Okay.
What kids really need in a divorce is for the parents to be the parents and for the kids to be allowed to be the kids.
Right.
And
Right.
that's one of the other factors where, again, as a parent, you have control.
Okay.
And if the kid has to take care of you through your divorce process, that poor kid is going to have a much harder time adjusting and transitioning to their new life. So don't do it to them.
Right.
That's where your therapist comes in hand, your
Mhm.
self-care, anything else. Don't confide in your kids. Don't give them too much information. I'm going to define too much information as potentially any information really about the divorce.
Okay.
If you find yourself telling your child something that you wouldn't be comfortable telling them in the presence of your spouse or ex-spouse,
Mm.
as if it were a we statement instead of an I statement or a he or she statement, don't say it.
Oh, that's great advice.
Okay.
That's great. Yeah. What about, you mentioned with the parents talking to therapists, should we discuss maybe, when might be some situations or is appropriate to get a therapist for the child? And how does that work, if the child is a minor?
Absolutely. I think so. This might sound controversial. There are some clinicians who might sit here and say, oh, absolutely. Any child going through divorce needs a therapist. I'm not one of them.
Okay.
I'm very careful about recommending therapy for children. I think that unfortunately, getting a kid into therapy too soon or when they don't really need it can be stigmatizing in and of itself. Now the
Mm.
kid's wondering what's wrong with him or her.
Oh,
Why'd you get
okay.
me a therapist, right? But if you're in the situation that we were just talking about, I think that engaging a family therapist or engaging a child therapist that has family therapy experience would be really important. And I'd also strongly encourage trying to find a therapist in a practice where there are other therapists who do other types of work. So individual work with children, work with adults, work with families, and who collaborate with each other. So just as in a collaborative divorce team, it's so important that we're all talking to each other to help make sure that we're kind of providing the scaffolding around this couple and their family to help shepherd them over the finish line in a really healthy way. It's really important that therapists working with a family are able to collaborate with each other so that mom's therapist isn't telling mom one thing, but dad's therapist is saying something else, and the kid's therapist is experiencing something else and doesn't know who to talk to. So in the same way that I like to be able to communicate with therapists, if I'm the coach on a collaborative divorce team, I also very much enjoy collaborating with other therapists when I'm a therapist. So I might be the therapist for an individual who is doing couples counseling with another therapist or vice versa, right?
How does that work though, in terms of everyone feeling like safe to share, right? The deep, ugly, scary thoughts about, especially if it's a kid and they're talking about their parents. I mean, how is that balanced out? It makes sense to me that you want to make sure it is a united front. So you're not causing more issues by having competing advice or competing strategies. But how is the, I guess, confidentiality protected so that people feel they can truly be open?
Great question. I always discuss with my client in detail what it is and what it is not okay for me to talk about with another professional.
Okay.
So that's how it should be handled.
Okay.
Right?
That makes sense.
And again, short of any situation where anybody's in danger potentially, there should be no reason
of course
that anything else be disclosed. Yeah. But no, it's a great question. It's not about the therapist getting together and comparing notes on trivial things. It's about the therapist being able to get together and just make sure that the messaging is consistent and that the kids are safe and that both parents are doing what is in the best interest of the children. And again, with the framework, not that people are doing bad things or doing the wrong things out of malicious intent. Sometimes that's the case. But in most cases, you know what? We're all out there doing the best we can. And we just don't always know what the best practices are.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Assume a positive intent.
When possible.
Yes.
A lot of yoga helps with that.
I agree. Yes. Yoga does. Yoga's the healthier choice for dealing with that.
Remind me of that when someone cuts me off in traffic.
Okay, will do. What else are some either like best practices or tips that you can share with parents to, again, as much as possible, foster a positive outcome for their kids, excuse me?
Yeah, sure. Children need consistency. They need consistency in routines, in structure. They need to know what to expect. So as you're working through your time sharing schedule, it's really important that the kids are informed about when they'll be with whom. I always, help clients put together color-coded calendars so that they can print it out, post it on the refrigerator. It's really clear to a kid, when am I with mom? When am I with dad?
Nice.
I always encourage parents also to make the transitions between parents much easier for the children. And that means typically do it at school. So instead of one parent dropping kids off at the other parent's house, even if the parents are relatively collaborative or able to be friendly, what I hear consistently from kids, and especially older kids, is how much they hate that. So let your transition times be at school. For example, one parent drops the kid at school on Monday morning, ending their parenting time. The other parent maybe picks up the child from school Monday afternoon. So the child never has to be in the presence of both parents who, depending on where they are in the process, might be really struggling to behave themselves, right?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So
and school's a neutral ground, right?
Exactly.
If one parent moved out and they're in a 1-bedroom apartment versus the 5-bedroom family home, I think that just even having the neutrality of school or the playground or wherever, you're not even kind of like highlighting that difference.
Absolutely. And then the other thing is, similar to the types of self-care routines that I recommend for my adult clients, make sure your kids are eating right. Make sure they're getting enough sleep. Make sure they're getting exercise. Make sure they're getting time outside. This would be a great time to introduce them to yoga or mindfulness, whether, again, depending on their ages, if it's a kid yoga class or some park district activity that just means they need to be outside in nature more. All of this helps them with their own emotional regulation. It serves as a great distraction to them as they're going through this big transition. So keep them healthy in the same way that I would advise you to keep yourself healthy. And keep the boundaries in place that we've talked about already today, right? So don't be talking to them more than you need to about their other parent.
Right.
Go talk to other people about that. But be there and know that your own self-care is what makes you available to take the best care of your children, so that when they do come to you with something that might be really enraging or frustrating, hey, Daddy, Mommy said something awful, right?
Yeah.
So that you, Dad, in that moment can take a quick breath and say, wow, that was interesting, rather than potentially respond in the way that you internally did. All of that serves your kids in the end. And then that makes your life better after all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, our time flew by. I think I'll do a quick overview. I took some notes here. I think, first of all, remember you have control. And what you mean by that is you have control over yourself. So
yes.
You want to control as much as you can how you react, whether it's in the moment or after the fact. Don't put your kids in the middle of the divorce. They shouldn't be your confidant. You shouldn't be discussing details with them. Stay in control. Try to get your kids in outside activities that could help them either be otherwise distracted or certainly engaged, whether it's in yoga or being in nature, things like that. Any other kind of maybe quick takeaways or things you wanted to highlight that I didn't?
I guess I would just say again, as much as you can maintain consistency and routines for them.
I knew I missed one.
Yeah. No, that's okay.
Sorry.
There are so many things. We could write a list of 30 things, right?
Yes.
But as much as your kids' lives can remain somewhat consistent as you go through the divorce process, the better. So if they, were doing volleyball twice a week or playing in, sports or some other activity, even if it seems as though it might need to change post-divorce, and this is where a collaborative process can be so helpful because we can help you do trial runs of different types of time sharing and co-parenting plans during the process so that the transition from in the process to after the process doesn't feel so dramatic. And that's part of the reason for that, right? Your kids will do better with a slower transition and the ability to maintain as many of their routines as they can. And when they can't, and when there must be a change in routine, clear communication about that, visual aids like color-coded calendars or things like that will be so important. And then my last thing really, and it's more for you and your kids, but this is the toughest process you'll ever go through. So have compassion and love for yourself in the same way that you do for your kids. And I would hope that you would never shame your child, your year-old, for stumbling as they're just taking their first few steps, nor would you shame your child or scold them as they're learning how to use a spoon if they hit their cheek with the yogurt on it instead of their mouth, right? Any of us who are parents have experienced that. Don't shame yourself either. Forgive yourself your failures. You will fail. We all stumble along the way. You know, you and I, Nicole, can sit here and talk about all these things years later, lots of therapy later, lots of practice later of how to do things better. But it's a tough road. It's a tough journey.
It is.
And you've got to forgive yourself and have compassion for yourself along the way so that you can be your best self for your kids.
That is a lovely way to wrap up our episode.
Thanks.
That is really terrific. I was paying close attention to this particular episode because, you know, just as a full confession here, I am a child of divorce, and I want to underscore something that you said, Dr. Richardson. My parents got a divorce when I was in my 20s, when I was like early 20s. It was not a secret that they needed to have a divorce. Okay. But that didn't mean it was any less. I had sisters who were all younger than me that I cared very much about. And, you know, so I was very keen and aware of what their communications were going to be like. And that's the second point is it's like, for those who are listening to this, I cannot emphasize enough, you know, it may be difficult to control your reactions to what maybe your partner or your spouse has said, but trust me, it has an impact on the kids. And you just, you know, it's just wise guidance on your part, saying, you know, remember, it impacts the kids, remember them. And, you know, if you need to leave and then go to the gym and punch things, that's a way better way of dealing with it, as a matter of fact.
Definitely.
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
For people who are listening to this and they want to maybe contact you, what is the best way for them to do that?
So they can go to my website, and email is really the best way to contact me. info@drlydiaricardson.com is the best way to reach me or reach my associate, Linda. Yeah.
Terrific. And Nicole, for those who are listening to the podcast who maybe want to talk to you a little bit.
Yes. Well, I would say anything on the emotional or like how to tell your kids about divorce or things like that. Dr. Richardson will be your best bet. But I am happy to, you know, talk through whether you're looking for what type of process, certainly the financial aspects. Our website will be the best resource, and that's going to be myprivatevista.com. And there's a contact us button on our homepage. And just please complete your information there, reference this episode, and I will make sure to follow up with you. Otherwise, you can also call our main office at 312-831-4370, and our receptionist will be able to connect you with me.
Yeah. And for those of you who are listening or thinking, I didn't have a pencil to write all this stuff down, don't worry. It's in the show notes. You can go back and just check the show notes and get all of the contact information you need to get a hold of. The other thing you can do that doesn't require really any effort at all is if you're not a subscriber, become one. And you can do that by hitting the follow button, hit the subscribe button. And that way, every time Nicole drops a new episode of her podcast, you're notified. I'd ask, if you like this podcast, give it a rating. Give it 4 or 5 good ratings and tell people about it. Word of mouth promotion, very much appreciated. Until next time, I'm Bill Tucker. on behalf of Nicole and everybody at My Private Vista, thank you for taking the time to listen. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Dollars and Cents Creating Your Fulfilled Life with Nicole Romito, sponsored by Private Vista. Visit our website at www.myprivatevista.com or give us a call at 312-831-4370. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Private Vista is a group comprised of investment professionals registered with Hightower Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Advisory services are offered through Hightower Advisors, LLC. This is not an offer to buy or sell securities. No investment process is free of risk, and there is no guarantee that the investment process or the investment opportunities referenced herein will be profitable. Past performance is neither indicative nor a guarantee of future results. The investment opportunities referenced herein may not be suitable for all investors. All data or other information referenced herein is from sources believed to be reliable. Any opinions, news, research, analyses, prices, or other data or information contained in this presentation is provided as general market commentary and does not constitute investment advice. Private Vista and Hightower Advisors, LLC, or any of its affiliates make no representations or warranties expressed or implied as to the accuracy or completeness of the information or for statements or errors or omissions, or results obtained from the use of this information. Private Vista and Hightower Advisors, LLC assume no liability for action made or taken in reliance on or relating in any way to this information. The information is provided as of the date referenced. Such data and other information are subject to changes without notice. This was created for informational purposes only. The opinions expressed herein are solely those of the authors and do not represent those of Hightower Advisors, LLC, or any of its affiliates.